than I could be picking up from those cans and bottles. Can't move him, buddy. That fucking asshole. There's something beautiful about the ducks. And it feels like well, you can see how much water is falling by the ripples on the water here. I mean, you can see how much rain is falling. Just tiny little droplets. Just tiny little ripples here. I can take my hat off. I can take my hat off. Hi there, ducky quacks. They're so pretty. They're just such pretty little creatures. And they're so gentle. Look at the way they swim. And maybe she thinks maybe I have some crackers or breadcrumbs for her. Maybe she just isn't scared of me. But she looks like she's waiting for me to throw some breadcrumbs. Hello, ducky. Hello. Hello, ducky. Quack, quack. Quackity, quack, 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 quack. Quack, quack. Hello. Hello. Hello, ducky. Hello. Hello. Hey, ducky. One thing about animals is most of them, they do read tone of voice. And if you speak to them gently, if you speak to the animals gently, most of them will feel that you're not a threat. Most of the time. If you speak gently, and even if you're standing there talking to yourself, they see you talking to yourself, but they see you're not shouting, you're not being aggressive, you're just being calm. Most of them won't be afraid of you, and they'll come up and say hello to you. Very often, they're thinking, especially in a place like this, a park like this, they're thinking, well, maybe this person's going to feed me some crumbs, because they get used to people coming and doing that. But by the same token, when you go out to a place where people don't come, a place where animals are not used to seeing people, then they'll come up to you unafraid, because they're not used to seeing how nasty and mean and aggressive and dangerous human beings can be. So it works both ways. Either they'll come up to you because they're used to seeing people and they're used to being fed, or they'll come up to you because they're not used to seeing people and they're not used to being frightened. And if you don't make any sudden movements, if you don't start throwing rocks and stuff, you know, I've been here where the kids here with their parents sitting over there, and the kids are taking rocks and throwing them at the ducks. And the mothers are just sitting there, so wait a second, hold on. You've got these little kids, these 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids, throwing rocks at the animals here, trying to hit the animals, and you're saying nothing? You're doing nothing to tell your kids, hey kids, that's wrong, do not hurt the animals. People are such fucking assholes. And then, one time, I was over here, and it was a day when there was, you know, picnics and families were here on a Sunday, and there was a barrel over. There used to be one or two trees over here, which they cut down. Attractive trees, but the parks people decided to cut them down to make this little path or something. Stupid assholes. Anyhow, there was a barrel over here. I'm pretty sure it was over here, and the kids were all playing around the barrel. They were all excited and laughing. Well, there was a baby raccoon in that barrel. Why? Because people throw out so much food from the picnics that the raccoons can smell the food. And they are lured into the barrels to get the food. They're hungry. They smell it. That's what they're designed to have, a sense of the smell, so that they can locate food. And they're overwhelmed by the smell, especially the baby raccoon gets in there, and then the baby couldn't get out. A larger raccoon could have gotten in and gotten out. The baby got in but couldn't get out. And he was a poor little frightening creature. He was down at the bottom of this barrel, and all his kids were looking, and they were so excited to see the raccoon. But their mothers were paranoid, of course. Their cell phone carrying mothers were, oh, I have rabies! Ah! He didn't have rabies, he was a baby. It wasn't a question of rabies, it was a question of babies. That little raccoon in that barrel was younger, well, certainly chronologically younger, but also younger in terms of its own raccoon age. That baby was younger in raccoon age than these paranoid women's own children that were so excited to see the raccoon. And I went up to the barrel, looked inside the poor little frightened raccoon. I was going to tip the barrel over so that the raccoon could scurry out, and that's what would have happened. The little frightened little baby raccoon would, out of that traumatizing experience, would have scurried out into right over to there. Wouldn't have bitten any kids, even if he had. He wouldn't have rabies even if he had bitten the kids, and he wouldn't. He would have run away from everybody. That was a frightened little baby child that happened to be a raccoon child that would have scurried as fast as he could away from all these scary creatures that he saw sitting around on two legs. But the mother said, no, don't touch the barrel. We called animal control. They're coming. Animal control is coming. Don't touch the barrel. They might have rabies. Might be dangerous. So I said, oh, all right. So I waited like 10 minutes, possibly 15. No, it wasn't more than that. Might have been 10 minutes for the guy the police guy from animal control. It was a policeman. It was Sunday. So the regular animal control people were off duty. So they had to get an ordinary cop guy who was a weekend cop guy on top of it to go and fill in. So he came with this grabbing tool. There was this pole with these wires on the end where you pulled at the end of the pole, you pulled it so that the wires would come together. There was one wire in a loop. And when you pull on the end of it and the loop pulls in and it tightens. And he reached in to the barrel with that thing, and it took him a minute or two to get that thing around the neck of that poor little frightened baby raccoon, and then pull it tight, and then lift that baby raccoon out by its neck. And that baby raccoon was in a panic, and he was probably choking. And the baby raccoon was screaming. And it was heartbreaking, and to see the guy carrying the raccoon by the pole, by the raccoon's neck, and he could have dropped him right over there, but no, he had to walk all the way over to in there somewhere, because he had to drop that scary, monstrous, rabid creature far away from doing any harm to the innocent human being children over here. So that poor little, I just sit here and witness that event of that baby raccoon being carried by its neck and screaming a pitiful scream. And in all these situations, I partly blame myself. Ultimately, the blame ends up resting on myself for allowing others. There's more. You get at least 50 cents here today. I blame myself for caving in. I blame myself for backing down and caving in. I should have just tipped that. When they said, oh, there's animal control coming, I said, fuck that. I should have just tipped the barrel and let the poor little baby out. And that's an experience. Now that's a formulating experience that, okay, at that time I didn't do it. But having been through that experience then, if the similar situation came up again, I would say, fuck it. I remember the time that I waited for animal control and we tortured that poor little raccoon baby by carrying it by its neck, and I'm not going to go through that again. This time, I'm not waiting. It's just, fuck you, lady. Screw you with your cell phone. And I would tip that barrel over and let the poor little baby run out. And if they want to think they think they want to press charges against me for releasing a dangerous wild animal, fuck them. Fuck all these people for filling these barrels with perfectly edible food. Perfectly edible food. And I noticed I have feasted on the food that has been perfectly edible. I still have 30 pounds of frozen hamburger in my freezer because I ate 5 or 10 pounds of it earlier in July. I got tired of getting fat from it, and I was disgusted with myself for even eating it, because you have to shut down your mind to stop to say, well, I'm not going to think about how the animals were butchered to create this hamburger. I need to roll up my fucking cuffs here. Oh, there's two swans just flying over the water there. I should have had that on. They're just cruising right above the surface of the water. Two swans. It was quite an image. I thought it was a dog running at first because it was just going straight, but it was two swans. So, what I was saying about the raccoons. Oh yeah, if they were going to say that. Oh, and about the food. So I have all these. I still have 30 pounds of frozen hamburger and butter. I still got 2 tubs of butter, that's little plastic packages I use every day. And I had hundreds of them. I had a whole big cardboard box just full of this butter that was just being thrown out, all sealed, all individual little sealed packages of butter. It can last me a fucking year. The hamburger in there could last me years at the rate I eat hamburger, even when I'm willing to close my mind to the horrors of how it became hamburger, of the animals that had to get slaughtered and what it is I'm putting in my mouth. I'm putting in the flesh of those those creatures that have been slaughtered, and you somehow have to manage to close your mind to these facts to be able to put that stuff in your mouth, and I could only close my mind so far. Close my mind. What's in this paper bag here? Come on. Nothing. I can only close my mind I could do it for a couple of weeks. I could eat maybe 5 or 10 pounds of hamburger before I started saying, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And now I still got 30 pounds of frozen hamburger. People didn't waste so much perfectly edible food. It wouldn't attract the raccoons and the squirrels and all the others to climb into the barrels looking for that food. It's their own fault. So fuck them all. And here again, you see, even with the automated robot trash collection, people still put other stuff next to the barrels that doesn't fit in the barrels. Stuff that you could use. Like pieces of wood and stuff. It's a very small brick building that's hardly any bigger than my studio apartment, and it's not all that attractive either. It's a little larger on the other side. Okay, so here's these wooden shelves out here, and this is like a dead end. This is just a private driveway here, private. So we just turn around, and let's go back. And again, this house. Oh, this looks like it even has 2 doors. This is a duplex, like 2 fucking families living in this. And if that's true, if this is divided into 2, probably not though. It's not. No, it's just 2 different doors for the same house. But even so, this house is hardly bigger, more than twice the size of my studio. And this house probably goes for $700,000 or $650,000. There's squirrely coming up to the garden. At least these people have a vegetable garden with raspberries and asparagus and various things. And they've thrown out a igloo cooler and this old stand that could maybe be painted, and these shelves. Now this is good wood. This is perfectly good wood in these shelves. And if I could get this home to Newton Lower Falls, 2 miles away, I could use this as shelves in my place for a little bit of organization. Hold some boxes underneath, and on the first shelf, on the second shelf, so I have 4 shelf spaces with this perfectly good wood, you know, you come here with a hammer and break it apart and take the wood home with you. On a buggy, if you had that. If you have an inclination. You know, people throw it out as if wood grows on trees or something. Now, that's supposed to be some kind of a joke about wood growing on trees, but it really isn't. Because the fact is, it takes decades, at least 50 years, for a tree to grow big enough to produce wood like that. And one tree takes 50, 60, 70, 80 years to produce those planks of wood, and then how many planks can you get out of a tree? And then that tree is dead, and that's 70, 80 years of effort on the part of that tree going into making a few planks, which then get thrown out into the trash. So it's not really a joke to say, well, people think wood grows on trees, that you can just throw it out in the trash like that. Just like the hamburgers, here's some plants that people have tossed out. You could put that in a pot and grow it, I guess, but it's not worth it to me at this point. Just like the hamburger, the tree, the wood. The wood and the hamburger are similar because they're both made out of living beings. A tree is a being, it's a living organism, a living creature. And maybe it doesn't have the sort of sensations that we associate with an animal life and even having a brain. But trees are living beings, just as cows are living beings. And what am I going to do with this paper ships? But there's another thing. You can still ride around on trash night and find perfectly good stuff, usable stuff, being thrown out. There's a bicycle up there being thrown out. People are still throwing stuff out on trash days. In spite of the robot trash pickup barrel systems. Alright, so we could use a painting. But it's alright, it's not the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. But someone could use it. And it is made out of wood. And it does, you do have to fucking lawnmower bullshit with the fucking leaf blowers and lawnmowers and they're blowing in the rain. They're trying to blow the leaves in the rain, the wet leaves. And here's a bicycle being thrown, a kid's bicycle. I'm going to presume this is being thrown out in the trash. Because it's next to this other thing. A treadmill. There's a treadmill and a child's bicycle being thrown out. There's nothing else that could take the bell off the child's bicycle. Some kid. It could be used, it could be cleaned up, but Jesus. Some kid could use this. There's nothing wrong with this bike. Some little kid could use it. And I cannot any longer go around being the custodian of trying to salvage all the usable items that people are throwing out on the curb. Every day. Nice and dry right here. I cannot be the custodian of all the curbside trash. Yeah, it looks like a decent wooden box, possibly, being thrown out. It looks like a decent wooden box, or a block. It is. It's a shoe shine box. It's a fucking shoe shine box. And it's serving. You can actually serving me. It's a shoe shine box. There's nothing in the shoe shine box. Sorry, this is better than shoe shine stuff, isn't it? It's too small for me to say I'm not going to take it. It's too solid of a box. It's too much of a solid, usable box for me to just leave it there in the trash. And what's this clothing that's going on? They could give to Goodwill, but no. They choose to throw out sweaters and hats and scarves. You see how, this is how fucking wasteful people still are in this fucking town. They can't stop wasting for the life of them. It's so ingrained that they're not capable of stopping the waste. This is their conspicuous waste mentality. This mentality of conspicuous consumption that they cannot break themselves out of, no matter what the city does in terms of changing trash collection procedures. People still fill these barrels with perfectly good stuff, and the difference is because they're colored. And because they're not clear plastic, people get away with throwing out perfectly good stuff. If it hadn't been for this wooden box propping that lid open, enough for me to see that there was wood in there, I wouldn't have seen in there to find this clothing. And I had to take my lock back from getting in between my wheels. Come on. Put this into my spokes.